Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased to welcome you to COP28's Presidency Press Conference. I'm Sara Al-Mahri, Director of Diplomatic Engagement at COP28, and I'll also be your moderator for today. Before we begin, may I please ask everyone to put their phones on silent mode, and we also kindly request that you hold your questions to the end of the remarks and limit your questions to one. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel of speakers. His Excellency Ambassador Majid Swedi, COP28 Director General and Special Representative. His Excellency Samuel Jinapur, Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, Republic of Ghana. Mr. Rich Duke, U.S. Deputy Special Envoy for Climate. Her Excellency Dr. Sheikh Al-Dhahri, Secretary General of the Environment Agency of Abu Dhabi. Also joining us on stage is Mr. Alex Sayre from the UNFCCC, who will participate in the Q&A. Now, Ambassador Majid, you have the floor.
Thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad that we want to welcome you to the penultimate day of COP28's Action Agenda program. Today, we are turning our agenda to nature and mobilizing action from governments and non-state actors to protect and restore ecosystems from ridges to reefs. As my colleague, Her Excellency Razan Al-Mubarak, the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion for COP28, has said repeatedly throughout the year, there's no path to Paris without nature. As a nation, the UAE is tremendously proud of our legacy of nature-based climate action across our desert, mountain, and coastal and marine ecosystems. And if you've not already, I would urge you to explore our natural sites during your stay here, including the mangroves that you can kayak through in Abu Dhabi. In just 20 minutes from Expo City is the Al Qudra Desert, which is a bike path through the desert dunes where gazelles can often be seen. So please go and check out the natural environment here in the UAE while you're here. I'm sure you will all be in desperate need of some outdoor time after 2 weeks of COP, and I promise you will not be disappointed. COP28 recognizes that the climate challenge and the nature challenge are intrinsically linked. Around the world, nature is being lost at an unprecedented rate, posing a direct risk to human societies, increasing greenhouse gas emissions and reducing climate resilience. During the World Climate Action Summit, our presidency and its partners presented a series of new and ambitious nature-related initiatives. And in particular, I want to thank the individuals behind the term negotiators. I want to thank Hannah, Jose, Lisa, Tosi, Catherine, Max, Ibrahim, and the countless others. We are at the moment in the COP process where their nights are getting extremely long and they're running on passion and purpose, and perhaps caffeine. And I can speak from experience, so my plea is for everyone to be extra kind to them over the coming days. They are working tremendously hard, and they need our support to deliver the outcome we all want to see. A new iteration of the GST text was released on Friday afternoon. The presidency convened a heads of delegation meeting to hear responses and reflections on the text in the evening. Countries were broadly supportive about using the third iteration as the basis for discussion. It will inform the consultations conducted by ministers on Saturday across mitigation, adaptation, and means of implementation, as well as cross-cutting issues on the GST. A recurring theme was the need to find a balance with the options for ambitious elements on mitigation, with strong and greater signals on adaptation, finance, and support for the energy transition, to have a balanced package. We're encouraging all parties to reach across the aisle, show flexibility, and find compromise solutions. This will be essential to, for example, getting a strong consensus language on fossil fuels. The presidency and the ministerial pairs will be working with parties tomorrow on options for consensus solutions and bridging proposals. On Sunday, parties will meet on a single-setting Majlis convened by the presidency to bring all issues together and ensure balance and ambition in our overall outcomes. Many options remain in the text, and there is a lot of work ahead to make the choices which can slim the text and help parties reach consensus by the end of this week. With that, I'll pass back to you, Sarah, and our guests.
Thank you, Ambassador Majid. Excellency Minister Jinapur, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, members of the press, the world is witnessing the relentless and devastating impact of climate change. We cannot ignore the dire consequences we have experienced, the tragedies that have befallen us, and the challenges that lie ahead. We have seen seasons of droughts, wars of intense flooding, prolonged hunger, and the emergence of diseases. These are just a few among the myriad of challenges we face as a result of climate change. At COP28 in Paris, on 12 December 2015, parties to the UNFCCC reached a landmark agreement to combat climate change by pursuing efforts to limit global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. 8 years down the line, we continue to grapple with the devastating effects of climate change, and we have recently been warned that we are gradually approaching global boiling. Indeed, the 1.5 degrees benchmark for limiting the effects of climate change cannot be achieved without nature. It is an undisputable fact that forest possesses great potential to generate a third of the global climate solutions needed by 2030 as a major sinks of greenhouse gas emissions. This is amply supported by a report from the United Nations Environmental Programme, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and other renowned scientists. Actions such as protecting natural ecosystems from loss and degradation, restoring ecosystems that have been degraded, and sustainably managing working lands can contribute significantly to mitigating climate change and in reaching the Paris Agreement goal of keeping global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Over the years, the world's forests have been undervalued and underprotected. Forest loss contributes nearly 5 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year. It is for this reason, members of the press, excellencies, that President Akufo-Addo of my country, Ghana, joined the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Right Honorable Rishi Sunak, to launch the momentous Forest and Climate Leadership Partnership, FCLP, at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, a legacy of the UK COP26 presidency, to signify the urgency of accelerating action to halt and reverse forest loss. The FCLP serves as a vehicle to deliver on the ambitious target of the Glasgow Leadership Declaration on Forest and Land Use. Through the various initiatives of the FCLP, countries will showcase how to transform their forest sectors and strengthen their economies in tandem. Ghana, through the country package of the FCLP, is building a strong foundation to access international carbon markets, strengthen agricultural and mining practices, promote aggressive afforestation and reforestation interventions, and reinforce the enabling conditions for a just transition. This will ultimately lead to climate change adaptation. We call on the world to commit finance towards nature-based solutions to resonate tangible outcomes. We must scale up nature-based solutions to protect and restore our forests to achieve a 1.5 degrees Celsius world. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, members of the press, the profound words by the renowned English primatologist and anthropologist Jane Goodall, that, and I quote, "Deforestation is changing our climate, harming people and the natural world. We must and can reverse this trend," end quote, must register on the conscience of the world. And the former United Nations Secretary General, the United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, has noted that, and I quote, "The climate emergency is a race we are losing, but it is a race we can win," end quote. And this is why, ladies and gentlemen, we must tackle climate change. In the words of the American patriot, Martin Luther King Jr., with, quote, the fierce urgency of now, end quote. The time for action is now. Let's get to work. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Minister, for your remarks. Mr. Duke, you have the floor.
Thank you. And I'd like to start by thanking you all for being here and focusing on this crucial agenda. We truly cannot keep a 1.5 degree centigrade future within reach unless we keep this high on the agenda and we follow through with the international cooperation and domestic actions that are required to seriously address forest loss and land use change globally. It is truly one of the top 3 things as an essential complement to the energy transition and stopping non-CO2 superpollutants that we must do to keep 1.5C within reach. And I want to add my personal thanks to Minister Jinapur for your leadership in co-chairing and launching the Forest Climate Leaders Partnership with Special Presidential Envoy for Climate John Kerry from the United States, and for everything you do in Ghana to address this challenge and opportunity. In COP26 in Glasgow, 145 leaders representing over 90% of the world's forests committed to halting and reversing forest loss by 2030. But in 2022, the rate of loss of primary tropical forests actually increased by 10%. So we need to keep this high on the agenda. Halting and reversing forest loss by 2030 is an imperative at this COP and well beyond. The Forest Climate Leaders Partnership started last year to carry on the legacy of COP26 of the Glasgow Leaders Declaration on Forest and Land Use is one way to propel that work. And we're proud to co-chair with Ghana this effort to drive ambitious action and maintain global focus on that 2030 goal during this critical decade of climate action. And now, with 5 new members at a ministerial level just joining the FCLP yesterday, we have 32 countries representing all the critical regions at the table. We intend this to be a partnership and forum for ambitious collaboration with other members of the forum and the broader global community. We convened at a ministerial level yesterday to maintain political leadership, and we will keep doing so in future COPs and in between COPs, in our own governments, with other governments, and with multilateral processes like the multilateral development banks, the regional and global World Bank that are so critical to this agenda. We're working to help set the global agenda on forests and climate through this and launching related partnerships. This is just the first year of this effort, but we've already launched 4 new initiatives that are contributing to the cause. We have new work on the use of sustainable wood and construction materials as a win-win solution that helps to create positive markets for sustainably sourced timber in the building sector. We also have a platform here for engagement that's more proactive and early in every process for Indigenous people and local communities in the important conversations that the FCLP is hosting. We're harnessing through the FCLP the potential of high-integrity jurisdictional REDD+ carbon markets to mobilize sustained forest finance at the scale required. And this year at this COP, we already have purchase agreements for those high-integrity carbon markets, including in Ghana and Costa Rica, representing $60 million in value already moving ahead. Next year, we anticipate 4 more such transactions worth over $150 million. And finally, we have work in countries, led by countries, that is already unlocking over $240 million to support tropical forest countries' respective visions for halting forest loss in their countries. I want to just note in particular, since Minister Jinapur has already spoken to Ghana, that in the Democratic Republic of Congo, we partnered with Special Envoy Stephanie Mbombo and the rest of the DRC government on a tremendous effort that now has over $60 million in new support and addresses the vision for a new climate economy in the Democratic Republic of Congo that will preserve the fact that will help to preserve the fact that the Congo Basin is the last remaining major tropical forest carbon sink. And this effort is intended to ensure that we keep it that way. The DRC's forests are too important, too big to fail, as some have put it, and we are committed to working on multiple elements: peatlands conservation, but also mobilizing supportive investment in things like smallholder agriculture and clean cooking with energy access investments, and also a pathway to high-integrity carbon markets on a jurisdictional basis in the DRC. So we are eager to build on this, and with the strong leadership of Minister Jinapur and so many others at the table, we are confident that we can get it done. And I do want to end on a high note, which is that in the year 2023, building on the extraordinary effort of President Lula and his team, we're seeing real progress in major reduction in the rate of deforestation in Brazil, and we expect much better numbers once they're finalized for 2023. So we're beginning to see things turn, and we just have to maintain the focus and the momentum on a global basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duke. Dr. Sheikha, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. I'm very proud and privileged to be here talking in the Nature Day, specifically from a local context and definitely from international perspective. So allow me to take you first to our local context. And to start with, our nation has always lived in very harsh environment, especially our founding fathers and our ancestors. They had limited resources when it comes to food, basic living requirement, and so on. And they always used to be a coastal nation who depended on the sea as the main source of food, and also it was their gate to know and to experience other cultures. Because of all that, being a nation that lived in the desert and along the coast, they realized the importance of nature, and they realized that they had to respect nature so the nature can respect them. So our environmental stewardship has started in early 1970s with the realization that my grandparents and our founding father have to protect, to prioritize protection first, and then restore, which is the talk of today. So there has been a lot of restoration and protection program here in UAE and specifically in Abu Dhabi. To start with, what we talk all about is mangrove and mangrove breakthrough. That movement started very early, 50 years ago and more, with planting many mangroves along the coast. And then came the Environment Agency to take and carry on that movement. Today, we are very proud to say that the area of mangroves, which is considered as a blue sink, has increased by 92%. Today we have 174 square kilometers, 64 square kilometers are planted. Second, we were one of the first 5 countries in 2013 to start leading on the studies of blue carbon, to understand what blue carbon means. And we exported all our science to many different institutions and countries, where we found that our mangrove have been absorbing 0.5 ton per hectare, which meant that we are absorbing 4 times or 5 times more than the Amazon forest. When it comes to protected area, we have established one of the largest networks. We call it Sheikh Zayed in commemoration of his effort, Sheikh Zayed Network. We have a very active network that is thriving with species, whether it's marine or terrestrial. 14 of our space, of marine space, is protected, and 17% of our land also is protected. While I personally see a decline in many species around the world, here in UAE, we see a thrive of many species. We are hosting the 2nd largest dugong after Australia. Our fisheries was once collapsing 4 years ago and reached 8%, while today we are celebrating the recovery of our fisheries, which is reaching 70%. There is many other stories when it comes to nature and conservation. Beyond our local border and space, we have reverted the status of some extinct species, and I will speak today about the scimitar horned oryx that never belonged to our country, but we happen to have a good number of them. And in 2014, we decided to take them back to Chad. And today, after being extinct in the wild for more than 30 years, we will soon announce the downlisting of this species for the globe. What I want to say, and there is many stories when it comes to nature, but I think I will take a lot of your time. The main message out of this, that with the will, with the commitment, and with starting with small actions, successful stories can happen. And I think this is what we need at the level of the globe. We need to commit, we need to have the will. And if UAE and Abu Dhabi has been able to have a lot of successful story, which I can share with you in more details, I think we as a globe can have more and more of these stories. Seagrass, coral reef, call it whatever within nature, we have a lot to share. And all of what we can share is based on backed science, backed data, backed knowledge and experience that is being carried with many local expertise, but also with many international expertise. Collaboration is the key to reversing the nature from red to green. Collaboration, partnership with international institutions, I believe it's the beacon of hope. I have been hearing a lot of breakthrough, which is announcement, which is amazing and pleasing. But also to conclude, I think here in Abu Dhabi and UAE, we have passed the breakthrough in many areas. And we passed it because we were conscious, we were committed, and we were consistent. So with these three elements, we are celebrating today many successful conservation stories in the Day of Nature here in COP28. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctora, for these very hopeful remarks. We will now open the floor for questions. Please state your name, media outlet, but also who your question is addressed to. Gentleman in the first row.
Seth Borenstein, Associated Press for Ambassador Majid. Yesterday, your colleagues at OPEC put out a letter asking member nations to object and reject to any strong fossil fuel language in the COP, whatever COP decision documents you have. What is the COP presidency and the UAE doing about that issue? Are you going to just allow that? Are you lobbying? What is going on in the presidency right now to combat that letter, if at all?
Our COP president has been very clear from day one that he wants to achieve an outcome that puts us clearly on track for 1.5 degrees. He is working closely with his ministers. Last night, we sat with the ministerial pairs and with all the ministers who are here today at COP28 to deliver an outcome. He laid out for them that he clearly wants to see an outcome that is as ambitious as possible, and we believe that we're going to deliver that. And everything we've done so far at COP28 has shown clearly that we are on track to do so. We've delivered on loss and damage. We've delivered on finance. We have more than $83 billion in finance. We've delivered across the board when it comes to declarations on finance, food, agriculture, health. We have delivered real-world actions that show clearly how we can get back on track to 1.5. Now we need the negotiators to show us how, in a decision that they are going to reset, put us on track to 1.5, and the challenge is up to them to deliver so, and that's what we are laser focused on, that North Star, and we will deliver it by the end of this COP.
Thank you, Ambassador Majid. Next question. please. Gentleman in the fourth row.
Hi, I'm Michael Holder from Business Green. A question for Ambassador Majid. Yesterday, the COP28 president said that he was looking for something, or hopeful that something unprecedented would be agreed at this year's COP. Many people would, or many parties would hope that that would be on ambitious language around fossil fuels. If something isn't achieved at this COP that's considered unprecedented by many people, does that leave the 1.5 degree target dead in the water? Is this the COP that will decide the fate of 1.5C?
We all know that 1.5 is about our collective action to get there. We've said, when we started this process, we started by saying, what is the problem we're trying to solve for? 1.5. Sultan is an engineer and a scientist and a CEO, and he thinks about things in a systematic way. So we started, well, what's 1.5? How do we get there? We have a 22 gigaton problem that we need to challenge, that we need to solve for. And that's how we came with our 4 pillars. To do that, 2/3 of that comes from the energy system. So how do we fast track the energy transition? That's about decarbonizing the energy system we have today and building up the energy system we have of the future. We've done that through the action agenda. Now we need to see that reflected in the negotiated outcome. Then we need to fix finance. So to fix finance, we need to have the transformation of the international financial institutions and financial architecture. We need to see delivery of old promises, the 100 billion, which we still haven't seen, although we've had promises to do so. And thanks to our German colleagues and Canadian colleagues who helped to show that we're almost there. We've had replenishment of the GCF. We need to see more capital, public capital coming to finance, particularly to the developing world. And then we need to move from hundreds of billions to trillions. So we need to mobilize private sector finance. So that's where solutions like Altera, the 30 billion private capital fund, is part of the solutions. We need an outcome on finance, on means of implementation in the outcome here at COP, and we need the negotiations to do that. We need to make it about people, lives, and livelihoods, our 3rd pillar. That's where our health declaration, our food declaration, our work that we've done around nature, the many declarations that are about adaptation. This is the adaptation story. That's where we need to have clear adaptation story. And in the negotiations, we need a global goal on adaptation, and we need a doubling of adaptation finance, and we need to see more ambition when it comes to adaptation. And we do it in an inclusive way. An inclusive way means we bring everybody together to bring their solutions, their ideas, and we have them cross-pollinate and bring those things together. Our COP's already been successful because we've delivered all of those things but one, which is the negotiated outcome, and that outcome has to be delivered by the parties, by the negotiators. Our job as a COP presidency is to help them to come to that solution by bringing some of them together and pushing them to come with an ambitious solution, which we're doing right now. Our COP president is working away with his ministerial partners to deliver an ambitious result, and we will deliver an ambitious result on the 12th.
Thank you, Ambassador.
At 11 a.m., according to the COP president.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for our other speakers? Lady in the first row, please.
Hi, I'm Nina Lakhani from The Guardian. A question for Mr. Duke. There's been a lot of focus on the UAE presidency, understandably, but the biggest producer of oil and gas this year is the United States. World biggest economy has pledged $17.5 million to the Loss and Damage Fund so far and failed to deliver $1 billion of the $3 billion promised on climate adaptation. How can developing countries trust the US to be a good faith actor in these negotiations? Because many developing countries tell us that they cannot do that because of these examples. You claim, the US claimed it wants to follow the science and be on track for 1.5, but then the actions do not suggest that.
So when we think about what's required to keep 1.5C within reach, we focus on 3 things: global energy transition by 2050, and then stopping the deforestation by 2030, as we were meant to be talking about here, and cutting non-CO2 superpollutants. And we are acting at home on all of those, consistent with our nationally determined contribution to cut our emissions 50 to 52% by 2030. And we're also working on a global basis to strive towards those objectives in every case, including in the forest sector. When it comes to the question of the energy transition, we recognize that it's going to be essential that the science demands that we achieve global net zero emissions by mid-century in order to limit warming to 1.5 C. And that does mean that the world will need to largely phase out fossil fuels in our energy systems by 2050, including with targeted use of carbon capture and storage. But we should also be globally phasing down fossil fuels in this critical decade. And of course, with regard to the global stocktake, we do need to be focusing on this broader agenda. That includes tripling renewables, doubling energy efficiency, making sure that we are tending to the fact that there's still 500 gigawatts of new coal power plants being built or in the pipeline around the world, and it's past time to stop building new coal-fired power plants. And we need to address what's happening with non-CO2. And let me just say that one example of how we are working on that agenda is the Sunnyland Statement last month with the United States and China. In the Sunnyland Statement, for the first time, China committed to, in its 2035 nationally determined contribution, include non-CO2 superpollutants in its NDC. That's important since China's non-CO2 emissions would be the third largest country in the world if they were a country. And so we are excited to be working with China on including all greenhouse gases in economy-wide NDCs and working with all governments to support that outcome for the next round of NDCs, because it is so important given that non-CO2 emissions account for over half of global climate change. And at the summit on non-CO2 that we organized here with the UAE and China just a few days ago, we had over $1 billion in new grant funding that we've mobilized from a combination of private and public and philanthropic sources for that agenda. We also had the United States finalize a new oil and gas regulation that will eliminate 1.5 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. So I cite that as just one example of where we are hard at work every day under Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Kerry's leadership to deliver on all of the elements that are required in order to keep 1.5 C within reach. Our team, and this is not my specific domain on our team, but our team has also been hard at work on everything that's required on the finance element of what's happening here this week.
Thank you. We'll take the question, lady in the middle of the last row.
Thank you very much. My name is Eugenia Kofakumi from Metro TV in Ghana. My question goes to Minister for Land and Natural Resources, Honorable Abujinapo. I just want to find out, first of all, what's Ghana's position on the phase-out of fossil fuel, the call for the phase-out of fossil fuel, and what are we pushing at this particular COP? And secondly, what gives you the assurance that developed countries would fulfill their commitment to nature-based solutions in Ghana? And again, it wouldn't be left at the rhetoric stage, but they would actually commit and fulfill their promise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that is a very important question. As you may be aware, Ghana has a very ambitious NDCs, and part of our effort at achieving our NDCs, our nationally determined contributions, is the green energy transition and all that we have to put in place to ensure that we have clean, green energy system in Ghana. And a lot of interventions are being put in place. I know, for example, that the Ministry of Energy is moving away from fossil fuels and putting in place a policy that will ensure that we have renewable energy, that we have cleaner energy, and a gamut of others, and to ensure that the power system in Ghana, by and large, is green and sustainable. So Ghana nationally determined contributions, one of the major tools or levers that we are deploying to achieve the objectives of our NDCs is green energy transition, and that is being done. And the second question, which I believe is a very important one, because at the heart of what we do and at the heart of preserving forests and deploying forest and nature-based climate action is financing. It's how do we raise the requisite funding to be able to propel forest and nature-based climate action. I mean, we're told, for example, that in 2023, from 2019 to 2023, about $20.2 billion was allocated for forest and nature-based climate action. Whereas when it came to energy transition, I mean, having green energy, green power, we're talking about trillions of US dollars. And so there is a disparity in terms of funding for forest and nature-based climate action, which is why under the FCLP, issues of high integrity voluntary carbon markets is very important to us. And that is why Ghana is participating actively in this high integrity voluntary carbon market. And of course, the commitments that have also been made by the developed world, and that is why I believe that this particular COP, which is a COP of stock taking and a COP where we are determined to walk the talk, is absolutely important. The example that comes up, which has been said many, many times, is a commitment that was made in Copenhagen, and that commitment which is still not been met. So yes, you are right in asking that question, but there is a blend of funding sources which a country like Ghana is tapping into. As you know, our president launched a country package which is gaining momentum. The UAE, we are very grateful to the UAE. The UAE is committed $30 million to that package. Singapore is coming on board. The United States is coming on board. Canada is coming on board. And so we're looking at a plethora of sources of funding, because the amount of money required for forest countries like Ghana, like Gabon, like Congo, like Brazil, like Indonesia, to be able to implement forest and nature-based climate action at scale is huge, and we need to look at all of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions today. I'd like to express our gratitude for our wonderful panel of speakers and for all of you with us. If you have any other inquiries, please make sure you share this with our press team who are available in the room. And thank you once again for being here today. Thank you.